Vacation is a time for us to relax, take a break and recharge our batteries. It's often a new experience as we journey into the unknown, but what happens when that new experience is met with sinister intentions? That's what happened to the people in tonight's stories. Here are 4 true vacations from hell. I was on vacation in Ithaca, New York with my boyfriend at the time. We had literally just gotten into town and stopped at a suspension bridge near Cornell's campus. I'm talking 10 minutes. I'm terrified of heights, so my boyfriend was coaxing me step by step over the bridge. It was gorgeous, and we stopped at the middle to take a picture. Maybe I was wrong about this whole idea. On the side we'd come from, there was a parking lot with steps leading to the bottom of the gorge, but on the far side, there were hiking paths with no barrier. A woman walked past us and offered to take a picture for us. We declined and she smiled and walked quickly to the far side of the bridge, where she smoothly jumped off into the gorge. There was not a second of hesitation. It was almost like she expected the path to keep going. The sound of a person hitting the ground from a jump like that sticks with you for life. This happened to me 5 years ago while vacationing in Italy. My friend and I decided to travel to the Italian seaside. We went to a really cool little city called Pastium. After visiting the Greek ruins that stood there, we made our way to the beach to get some sun and relaxation. When we arrived, we passed by a group of 4 men. When we walked by them, they all stopped talking and stared at us as we went by. That was the last interaction we had with them, but it put us on edge. To get some space from them, we walked a fair distance until we found a nice private area. Aside from the group of men, my friend and I were the only 2 people on the beach. After tanning for not too long, maybe about 15 minutes, I noticed a man walk down the shore in front of us, not from the group from before. He glanced up at us and kept walking. I didn't think anything of it until he turned back, walked past us again, and continued this for a while until he sat down about 10 feet in front of us, facing the beach. He could have sat anywhere else on the empty beach, but of course, he decided to sit in front of us. My friend and I were both creeped out at this point, but hadn't been to the beach in months, and decided to ignore him and hoped that he went away. Eventually he came up to us and started speaking to us in Italian. We pretended we couldn't understand him, so he continued in broken English. I told him to leave us alone, that we're not interested in talking to him. He started to walk away, but before leaving, he took a photo of our asses on his phone as we were laying on our stomachs in bikinis. I jumped up and told him to delete it immediately, but he just hurried away and I didn't feel like chasing after the creep, but that didn't change how violated I felt. After that, we were in a bad mood and decided to just give up on the beach. We walked back to the small town and went to a bar for a drink. Once again, we were the only people with the exception of a female bartender. Sitting on the patio, we finally started to relax when a shitty red sedan pulls up in front of the patio and sits there with the engine running. My friend and I look at each other, dread setting in. After a few minutes, the car pulls away and we hope it's just a random person. 5 minutes later, the car returns. This time, the window rolls down and the same man from the beach starts to shout something at us. My temper flared up and I shouted something stupid. I don't remember what I said, but all he did was laugh and then speed away. Not long after that, he returned and stared at us with the creepiest smile on his face. I got up and got the bartender. When he saw this, he drove away and didn't return. My friend and I just wanted to go back to our hotels at this point. The bartender asked us if we wanted her to walk us to the train station, a 30-minute walk through wheat fields over dirt roads. We declined, thinking he had been scared off and that we were okay to walk back. So after walking down the quiet dirt road, we hear a car pull up behind us. We looked back and lo and behold, it was a red sedan. Not knowing what to do, we keep our eyes down as he followed us and just kept walking. Fortunately for us, a tourist bus drove down the road. In the sedan's attempt to avoid the bus, he accidentally sideswiped it and then zoomed off to avoid dealing with that situation. We were so happy to finally be rid of him. We walked another 10 minutes down the road where we start to approach the fork where we were going to turn left. On the fork to the right, there were a few trees and a shaded area underneath. As we got closer, we saw the red car parked under the trees, facing our direction. My stomach dropped to my knees. He had been waiting for us, and now maybe blamed us for the accident. We didn't have anywhere to hide, and nothing to protect ourselves with, and there was no reception to call for help. I remember the awful feeling when he pulled out of his spider hole and started driving down the road towards us. All of a sudden, another car came down the road from the opposite fork. Terrified and with no other options, we ran in front of the new car and started waving our arms for it to slow down. The driver stopped, and in our poor Italian, we asked for help and a ride to the train station. The driver was the owner of a local hostel and gave us a ride back to the train station in the opposite direction he had been headed in. This happened in the early 2000s. I was vacationing in the Caribbean with my family when I was about 9 or 10 years old. This particular island was largely impoverished. Of course, the resort communities where all the tourists flocked to were the beautiful slices of paradise. As a young kid staying at a fancy vacation spot, you don't really think about the reality that you're in a foreign country that you don't know very well. You're not familiar with what goes on outside the gated resort, and you certainly aren't aware that as well as being known for gorgeous beaches, many islands in the Caribbean are hubs for human trafficking, drug smuggling, etc. One night, I left the resort with my family to go to one of those sunset boat rides. We joined another family and took a shuttle to a marina that was maybe half an hour away from the resort. I remember as we rode to the marina, I got more of a sense of how destitute some of the less touristy areas of the island were. I saw many of the locals living in small ramshackle huts made out of salvaged metal, and that the landscape was very much barren desert, unlike the lush gardens that were watered daily within the walls of the resort. Anyway, the shuttle dropped us off at the docks, and we went to the boat tour. We had an amazing time. The boat's crews pointed out unique wildlife and told us about the history of the islands. By the time we returned to the docks, it was pitch black out, probably about 11 PM, and barely being 10 years old, I was thoroughly exhausted. I hopped out of the boat and walked along the dock back to the parking lot where the shuttle had dropped us off earlier. My parents and the other adults didn't seem to be really paying attention to me, and by the time they'd gotten off the boat, I was probably a good 200 feet away from them. Now the marina itself is very well lit, but as soon as I turned the corner to the parking lot, I may as well have fallen into a cave. I could hardly see anything. I squinted my eyes and tried to see if the van we'd arrived in was parked nearby, but after a few seconds, somebody suddenly grabbed my shoulder very tight.
"Who did you come here with?"
The voice was scolding, and I immediately began to freak out because I thought I was in trouble.
"Somebody drove you here?"
I tried to explain that I was with my family and we were waiting for our driver, but the man cut me off.
"You drove here with me. Here, come to my car."
At this point, the guy began pulling me further into the dark parking lot toward a vehicle I'd never seen before. I wouldn't even say that I was panicking at this point. I was very confused and knew that something was definitely not right about the situation, but I'd been raised to listen to adults and didn't want to get into trouble for not listening to the guy. But as he continued to pull me towards his car, I realized that it was much too small to fit the number of people who I'd arrived with, and this is when I started to really start pulling back against the guy and try breaking his grip. I was about to raise my voice and start screaming when suddenly a set of floodlights turned on and lit up the parking lot. My parents and the group of people we were with turned the corner and the guy immediately let go of my arm. I looked up at him and all I remember is that he looked scary. He was bald and had scars on his face. He was probably in his late 40s. He clearly didn't even realize that an entire group of people were just 30 seconds behind me. His eyes were wide and he was dumbfounded. One of the men who worked at the dock called out and said something to him, but he sort of threw his arms up and shrugged and walked away. On the way back to the resort, my dad asked me something like, "What did that guy want from you?" I told him that he wanted me to ride in his shuttle and that I got lost or something like that. My dad found it as a perfectly reasonable explanation and we never spoke about it again. The sheer sketchiness of this event didn't fully hit me until years later when I was in high school and read about the disappearances of Amy Bradley and Natalie Holloway. They both vanished while on vacation in the Caribbean in the late 1990s, early 2000s. I'm from the UK and our summer vacations last 6 weeks. When I was 14 or 15, my younger brother and older sister decided to break up our vacation by taking us to a log cabin in Scotland for a week. She knew there wasn't much to do around town and she was always a great big sister, always looking out for my brother and me. My parents were happy for her to take us and we were happy to go. My sister told us that we could both invite one friend. For my brother that was easy as he had one best friend, but for me it was kinda difficult as I had 5 friends to choose from. I basically ended up leaving it too late to decide who I wanted to bring and all my friends didn't have enough notice to come. I was pretty upset about it, but my sister told me that while my brother was off with his friend, we would have some sister and brother time and spend some quality time together. I know that sounds weird, but it wasn't. It was actually kinda sweet. We'd been in the cabin for 2 nights at that point, and both of those nights we had ordered takeout and stayed in and watched TV or played board games. On our 3rd night, my brother and his friend took over the TV to play games, so my sister asked me if I wanted to go to the pub that was on the site. Aside from hundreds of cabins, there was a restaurant, pizza takeout, fish and chip takeout, a convenience shop, and also a pub or disco. It was kind of both. I jumped at the chance to go. I loved makeup, heels and nice dresses, so the thought of getting myself all dressed up and going to a grown-up bar was so exciting for me. As I mentioned earlier, I'm from the UK and anyone here under 18 can go into a bar as long as you're not drinking alcohol, so I wasn't sneaking in or anything. There were kids as young as 2 or 3 there. We got inside and my sister told me to find a seat and she'd get us a drink. She ordered me a lemonade and herself a vodka and lemonade. While I was waiting for her to come back, I couldn't have been sitting for more than 3 minutes at the most. This guy looked like he was about 30 or 35. He came over to speak to me. He was collecting glasses, so he obviously worked there. He said hi and told me I looked very pretty tonight. Being extremely naive, I smiled and thanked him. I didn't think this was strange for a second, so when my sister got back with our drinks, I didn't think anything of it. He came around again and seemed to be lingering around our table. My sister hadn't noticed and I didn't really think much of it. After a few minutes, my sister got up to use a restroom and I was sat alone. He walked straight over to me and started up a conversation about how I liked the cabin site and how long I was here for. He never took his eyes off my chest. I was very well developed for a 14-15-year-old at the time. This made me really uncomfortable and I felt quite scared, but I didn't know what to say to him to get him to stop. When he saw my sister coming back, he left. I told her what had happened and she looked angry. She told me he was a creep and if it happened again, to tell her. About 20 minutes pass and he comes over again, talking to my chest, but again my sister is at the bar ordering more drinks. When she comes back this time, he doesn't leave and he continues talking. My sister asks why he's there and he replies, "I work here." My sister asks why he's talking to me. As blatant as anything, he answers, "She has great tits." I told him that I'm only 14, and he says, "Yeah, so what? I think you should remove that top and let me see." My sister screams at him to leave and calls him a pervert. He moves along and my sister gets up, tells me she's going to speak to a manager. As soon as she's gone, he comes back, picks up my drink she's just bought me, and pours half of it all down my top. You're all wet now. You'll need to remove that top. I don't know how else to respond other than, I'm only 14. What are you doing? Please stop. He looks me in the eyes for the first time for the night and gives me the creepiest grin I've ever seen to this day. I'm frozen in fear. I can't move. He grabs a hold of my breast in his hands and plays with them in the busy bar in front of everyone. To this day, I can't understand how no one saw. It takes me a few seconds to realize what's happening. I'm numb. Once I realize what he's doing, I freaked out. I hadn't even been kissed or even held hands with a guy before, and here's this grown man feeling my boobs. In the moment of panic, I just run. I don't pick up my phone, my purse. I don't even call for my sister who's at the bar shouting at a manager. I just run. I run out the door and start making my way back to our cabin as fast as I can. I'm not a runner at all. I'm anything but athletic, and I'm wearing heels, but I've never run so fast in my life. I'm so scared I don't even realize that it's midnight, there's no lights on anywhere, and that I'm running in the complete opposite direction of our cabin. I look behind me for a second, and he's running after me. I swear I thought my heart had stopped. He gained on me quickly and started yelling at me, but I kept running. When I turned around again, he was so close it terrified me.
Help!
It's midnight, so a lot of the cabins are in complete darkness, but I managed to see the lights on in one of the cabins I'm approaching.
Please!
I continue screaming for help, and the door opens. A man about the same age as the one who's following me steps outside and looks confused. He sees me sobbing and asks if I'm okay. I turn around and the pervert following me is running away. I can barely speak to the guy. I'm so scared. He asks me what happened, and I tell him I was being chased by a pedophile. He wakes up his girlfriend, and she waits with me while he goes outside to have a look around. He comes back a few minutes later and tells me no one's there, but that he'll walk with me to my cabin. I made it back to my anxiously waiting sister. I run to her and tell her everything. She thanks the guy for helping me, and she calls reception from our cabin. We never waited to hear what happened. The next morning we packed our things and left. But what freaks me out till this day is that I can only assume what he would have done if he caught me. That brings us to the end. Thanks for joining me for Wednesday Night Horrors. If you liked the video, please give it a like and let me know what you thought in the comments below. So in case you missed it on the last video, just a heads up, I'm going to be on a stream with the Strangest on their channel on 21st of September at 8 PM Eastern Standard Time. It'll be a whole bunch of fun. These guys are awesome. They do a stream pretty much every Friday at the same time, and they are a ton of fun. I love watching their content. I love watching their streams. It's a great chance to be able to talk to them, ask them questions, get to know them more. You know, if you want any suggestions to put forward, I'm sure they'll be open to it. And you know, they're really, really cool guys, and probably two of the best content makers I've actually found on YouTube. These guys deserve every bit of credit and every bit of success that they get. So I genuinely mean that for them and any other content makers who put in the hard work and the long miles that they do. So make sure you head over to their channel. I'll put a link to the description below. Give them a sub, hit the notification bell. They've got another channel set up as well. I can't remember what it is right now, but I'll link it in the description as well. Give that a sub. They're all into horror, they're into paranormal, and they really know their shit. So go check them out, guys. I'll see you all in the next one.